Welcome to the pre-taping of our November the 21st, It Happened in Grand Prairie History, as we bring you the history of Grand Prairie during this year of 2000 and look on to some people that have made history and are continuing to make history this very day. This is our history tape number 410, and we're very honored today. We have part of the family. All of the family couldn't be here today, but we do have the Reverend Tom Heath of the Trinity Baptist Church here in Grand Prairie, Texas, who's really famous in that sense of the word, in that his parishioners really love and adore him for 30 long years. And we're so pleased to welcome him to the dais today. Reverend Tom.
Thank you so much.
It's real great to have you with us. Sans, Miss Margie, your beautiful, beautiful wife, who is one of our good friends that aids and abets us at the city of Grand Prairie, Texas. And we'll talk about her in a little bit. In her absence, we'll talk good, won't we?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
All right. As we do the history, we'd like for you to look out into your camera and tell us about the real Tom Heath. We want to get to the part where you would give us a little bit of your genealogy, the names of your parents, your mother's maiden name, and the siblings in your family, if you'd like to document that at this time.
All righty. Well, I was born in October 1938 to Roy A. and Charlene Heath, and my parents were not Christians when I was born, and their life was a rather hectic life. It was towards the end of the Depression, and they had a difficulty raising one child and then had another child, and times were hard for them. And as a result, my coming into their life made their life a little more hectic. And so...
Where were you born?
In Tulsa, Oklahoma.
In Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Yes,
okay,
yes,
we have an Okie on the dais
today.
today.
But you understand, I don't tell everyone I was born in Oklahoma.
But we'll know it in Grand Prairie, Texas now, won't we? Okay,
yeah.
And did you have other brothers and sisters?
I have an older sister. Her name is Peggy Ann, and she's married to Mr. Jack Wolf, and they live in Prescott, Arizona.
All right, okay.
And they have set their life out there. Why anybody would want to move to Arizona, I don't know, but that's where they live. And so...
and your mother's maiden name, we failed to get that.
Gardner.
Gardner.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Her mother was mostly Choctaw Indian, and her daddy was an Irishman, and he was referred to as Shorty. In fact, I did not really know his name until I was an adult.
Your grandfather?
My grandfather.
Yes.
And I'd lived with them and stayed with them from time to time, and all I ever heard was Shorty. Everybody just called him Shorty.
And so, what did your dad do for a living? Anything he could find during the Depression, right?
During the Depression, he drove a truck. And right after that period of time, my dad became a Christian. And then shortly after he became a Christian, my mom and dad separated. And then my dad felt a burden to preach, and so he went off to seminary, and then his life from that point on, he was an evangelist.
Yes, how wonderful.
Yes.
What a background.
And yeah, it really is. And it's the kind of thing where I didn't live with my dad all the time, didn't live with my mom all the time. I lived with them off and on, and then I lived with other people growing up. And I had a rather varied background in that area.
Where'd you start to school? What town were you in?
Started to school in the suburbs of Weatherford, Texas.
Weatherford?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
In an area that used to be known as Harmony.
Harmony, Texas.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
I don't think they ever referred to it as a town. It's just a community of Harmony.
Kind of like Prairie.
Yep.
Yes, Prairie, Texas.
It was, they had a school and they had a church house.
How many grades?
They had 2 rooms.
All right.
It was not a one-room schoolhouse. It was a two-room school. Yes, ma'am.
Schoolhouse.
Had a divider right down the middle, made it 2 rooms. And so it was, they had 8 grades, And this is, of course, towards the end of the war, World War II.
Yeah.
And so my first grade in school, the first day was a memorable day.
Oh.
We went to school, rode a surplus Red Cross ambulance to school.
I see.
And they had four-wheel drive, old clay roads, out in south of Weatherford, and went to school raining hard. Coming home, the bus slid off into the ditch.
Oh my, what a beginning.
What a beginning. And so I thought, boy, this is some way to start the school.
Yes.
And of course, the people I lived with were some very nice people. And their names was McQueen. And I do not remember their first names, but I thought, when I get home, I've still got chores to do, and I wish we could get out of this bus.
All right. And after Harmony, where did you go?
Well, I moved from there to Lena Pope Children's Home.
Oh, that is wonderful.
Yes, and I stayed in Lena Pope for a little over 3 months.
Yeah.
And just before school started, I moved to Hillsboro.
Hillsboro, Texas.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
And went to school there and lived with some people by the name of White in Hillsboro.
All right.
And then from Hillsboro, my sister and I lived together there at Hillsboro, and our mother came and got us. We went back to Tulsa.
All right.
And then moved on lived in Tulsa through the remainder of the second grade and moved to Rockford, Illinois.
Wow.
Yeah. And my dad was living up there, and so I went to live with my dad. And I tell everyone that 3 of the hardest years of my life was one winter in Rockford, Illinois.
Oh, it was cold.
Cold. It was bitterly cold.
Colder than Oklahoma, wasn't it?
Yes, ma'am. It was so cold that we lived in, back then they had trailer houses. Mm-hmm. You understand, they did not have mobile homes.
Just a trailer house.
They were trailer houses. They didn't have indoor plumbing, had common bathhouse, common restroom facilities. And the park was set up around the common bathhouse. Mm-hmm. And it was so cold, though, that we couldn't keep water from freezing within the trailer.
Yes.
Oh,
my.
It's just, but then we weren't the only ones. Most people lived that way
Yes.
at that time. And so, but anyway, finished that year. Rockford was very crowded, and so they had, at the school I finally wound up going to, I lived with some other people until I moved with my dad. And then when I lived with my dad, we lived close to Lincoln School, and it was so crowded they went on a half-day basis.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And but it was one of those things where you learn to read and write anyway.
Yes, you do.
You didn't have a choice in that day. There wasn't an option.
All right.
You had to learn it.
Okay. Well,
And,
where did you attend high school?
Well, I finished the last 2 years of high school in Denton, Texas.
Denton, Texas.
Yes,
You've
ma'am.
moved back to Texas.
Moved back to America. I
Yes.
did.
Oh, you did. That was such a blessing, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. Anything this
Warmer
side of the
than
Rio
Illinois.
Grande. Yeah, right. Yes, ma'am. And I finished up high school in Denton, and that's where I met Margie.
Oh, you met her in
Yes.
Denton.
She was a Denton girl, hometown. She's born in Dallas, but raised in Denton all her life.
Yes.
And here I was.
Where did you meet her?
In high school.
In the high school?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we got to talk about high school just a little bit. When you were in high school, did you have a favorite teacher or favorite subject, or did you know what direction you wanted to take your life in that time?
Quite honestly, my favorite subject was football.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay.
And the rest of it, I just...
Tolerated it.
I enjoyed algebra.
Yeah.
Had a dear teacher in algebra. I struggled in school until I was in the 8th grade, and a teacher informed me at that time that if anybody else could learn it, I could learn it.
Uh-huh.
And so from that point on, school became a real delight to me.
Yes.
And the time I was in high school, I enjoyed going to school. Because with me, and of course with a lot of fellows in that era, if you didn't go to school, you had to work.
Yes.
So going to school was a very pleasant way to get out of holding down a full-time job. And in fact, I skipped one day of school, one afternoon of school.
Uh-huh.
And the school had already called the house and informed my stepmom that I had missed school. So I figured I better tell my dad about it. I told my dad. My dad said, well, I'll tell you what. If you don't care to go to school, you need to have a job. The next day you miss of school, you need to have a full-time job.
Uh-oh.
So
that made your decision very easy, didn't it?
wasn't a problem. I could go to school. And so I enjoyed school, and Margie and I married, and we had, after school, I worked for a couple of different places, and wound up working for Alan Butane. And I had a goal of going into the trucking business. Mm-hmm. That was my goal.
Yes.
And then one day I felt like maybe I should do more for the Lord.
All right.
And I felt a real urging to attend school. I felt a burden in my heart to preach. That's just what it boils down to.
Yes.
And with that, I left my job, packed my family up, sold our house. We moved to Fort Worth, and I started school in the old Bible Baptist Seminary.
All right.
And went to school, worked for a freight company for a while, and then I went to work for a church in Haltom City, and I worked there until I finished school.
All right.
And our son was born before I started school.
All right, and we need his name.
His name is Eric.
All right. And where is Eric now?
Eric lives in Hartselle, Alabama.
Oh, you let him go away too far away.
Well, it is one of those things where Eric felt a real need to work with a drug rehab ministry.
Yes.
And so he went to Alabama, and he worked over there for 10 years with that ministry.
All right.
And then he worked 2 or 3 other jobs, became a police officer for about 9 years, and got hurt. And so now he drives a truck.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
We're
making the full circles, aren't we?
We're making the full circles, yes, ma'am.
All righty. All right.
And then our daughter was born while I was in seminary.
All right, and her name?
Her name is Tammy, and her name is Tammy Reeves.
All right.
And she had, she's one of those children that just always on the go, always doing something, as a lot of children are. And I thought of all the children who would settle down, and have a home. Well, she did, and now she has 4 children.
4 children,
Yes,
4
ma'am.
wonderful children. Can you name your grandchildren?
Her oldest is Dylan Ray, and her next son is Colton Reeves. Colton Heath Reeves. I should point that out.
Don't forget that.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Need
Yes,
to point that
yes.
out. And her next child is a girl. Her name is Faith Marie. And of course, that's Margie's middle name. And then her youngest one is Charity Lee. And they range in age from 14 years to 4 years.
To 4 years.
Yes.
Where do they live now?
They live in Mansfield.
In Mansfield. That's
Yes, ma'am.
nearby.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
That's close
and
enough
I'm very thankful
That's close enough Grandfather gets to keep them every now and
You
then.
better know it. It's close enough that we get to visit. Of course, they attend our church, and so we have the privilege to be with them very frequently, and it's a joy.
That is
It's a joy.
wonderful. And now that we've gotten you all married in Fort Worth, and you're through with seminary, and we've gotten your family here so we could document them properly, but now we need to get back. After the seminary, what was your first assignment?
Well, I accepted the pastorate of a church in Irving, and I was there for about 15 months. And then I went to South Louisiana. We went to Lake Charles, Louisiana, which, if you've been to Louisiana, you know it's a different part of America.
Yes, it is. It's kind of a different little world, isn't it?
It is. They have their own program, their own way of doing things, and it is, looking back on it, it is something that we fit in with those people very well. We had a good ministry there for over 6 years.
Okay.
And in fact, we started a church called South City Baptist Church, and it was a tremendous undertaking in that when we started the church, felt a burden to start that particular church. The city of Lake Charles had just closed down an air base.
Yes.
Or the Air Force had just closed down an air base in the city of Lake Charles. There were 6,000 vacant houses.
Wow.
People moved out by the groves. But by the same token, the Lord was in it, and so we did it. And we had been there for, as I said, over 6 years. And a friend asked me to come and speak to the people here about the prospect of pastoring at Trinity Baptist. And this was in, 30 years ago this month.
30 years ago,
Yes, ma'am.
yes. We're getting up to date now.
Getting up to date, yes ma'am.
All right.
And I told him, I said, well, I will go and speak to them, but I'm not sure that's what the Lord would want me to do.
Yes.
But I went and spoke to them. There was about 4 or 5 men that I met with, and I really felt impressed of the Lord to come here.
All right, and was that the Trinity that we know of
Yes,
today?
ma'am. Same church, same
church,
building, same location.
I think that is
Yeah.
so wonderful.
And
How easy was it to pull up stakes in Louisiana after you had been there 6 years, after you had built a congregation?
it's very hard for me.
Yes.
It was not hard for my family,
Yeah.
because my wife's family still lived in Denton. And so it made it very easy for them, which was fine, but I felt like it was of the Lord.
Yes.
And so to make the transition, the hardest part was the church in Louisiana. We had, the building wasn't as large, but it was a thing where the church house was full every service.
Yes.
And had reached 190 or so in Sunday school, and we came up here and there were 30 people here. And so that was a real change. But I believe with all my heart it was of the Lord.
Yes.
And so we just said, fine, we'll do it. And so we moved.
You arrived in Grand Prairie 30 years ago this
ma'am.
month.
Yes, ma'am.
That is wonderful. How did the family take to this adjustment, moving schools and et cetera?
I think our children did very well.
Yes.
There was not, now in Louisiana, the school district that we were in was a good school district. And so when they came here, the transition was not difficult. If it had been a poor district or something,
Yes.
because Grand Prairie has always had good schools. And
Yes.
so our children made the move very easy.
Good.
And it was one of those things where I just believed with all my heart that's what God wanted us to do. And so And you understand, I'm kind of an old fella and old-fashioned, and I just told my family, this is what we're going to do. I believe it's of the Lord. Yeah.
Yes.
And when looking back on it, it'd been nice to say, what do y'all think? You know, but well, I did ask my wife, but didn't consult the children. But our children were delighted. They enjoyed the move. They enjoyed being close to their grandparents.
Yes.
And in fact, we moved up here, and about 3 years after we moved up here, Margie's mother passed away. So we had
3 years at least with her.
We had time to be close to her.
Yeah. That is wonderful. Tell me when you finally allowed Margie to go to work for the city.
Well, it's kind of a funny story. Our son had to go to the hospital, and the insurance company found a way to get around paying the bill.
I understand. Been there.
Yes, and so they said he wasn't eligible, and consequently we'd have to pay the bill ourselves. So at that time, Margie was working just part-time secretary at the church.
Yeah.
Which is minimal pay at the least.
That's right.
Just minimal.
Almost a gift of love.
Almost a gift of love. In fact, one of the fellows says, we don't even pay enough, and this was years ago, you understand, but we don't even pay enough to call it mad money. And, but anyway, our daughter was nearing completion of high school, and Margie said she'd thought some about going to work, and we discussed it, and she decided she'd go to work. So the first job she had was over in Irving, working for National Automotive Products and parent company for Napa. And then one day she said, you know, I think I like working, but I believe I would like to work closer. And I said, well, we'll just look around Grand Prairie. And one day I was talking to Chief Burr, Kenneth Burr.
Yes, Ken Burr.
And he and I were friends, and every once in a while I go by and have coffee with him. And he asked me, he said, preacher, do you know where I can get a good secretary?
You said, I've got her.
I tell you, I got her. And so they opened the job up, and the lady who was secretary at the fire department decided to move over to the police department, and left an opening at the fire department.
Fire department.
And so
We'll take it.
she took that, yeah. And she's been there ever since.
She's been there ever since, and she is just so wonderful and so dependable.
Thank you.
We're getting down to the end of our interview. I want to talk a little bit about Trinity.
Okay.
And tell us where you're located. We have 5 minutes left, so let's talk about the church now for about 5 minutes. The wonderful people that you have there, that you've been with, that love and adore you and have kept you for 30 years.
Put up with me for 30 years.
All right, tell us where you're located.
We're located at 314 Skyline Road, at the corner of Southeast 4th and Skyline. And
how often do you meet?
We have Sunday morning services, Sunday school at 9:45.
All right.
The morning worship service at 10:50. The Sunday evening service at 6 o'clock.
All right.
And Wednesday night we have our midweek service at 7:30.
7:30.
And I came there 30 years ago. We still have people in the church that were there when I came.
You do. How wonderful.
Yes, ma'am. And we have actually, there's 8 or 10 people that were there when I came.
Yes.
And of the original 30.
Yeah. Yes.
The others have nearly all of the others have passed away.
Yes.
And we have a wonderful group of people.
All right. Really do you have any special programs that you're really proud of? Like, do you have a senior citizens group that does good things and travels around and does things for the church? Do you have any youth programs? Do you have anything you
We have an Awana program on Wednesday night that helps children memorize Scripture.
How wonderful.
We have a mission program within our church that we help foreign and domestic missionaries. We help missionaries all over America and around the world, and to the tune of in excess of $125,000 a year. And we have a tremendous mission program, and then we have an outreach within the community that we reach people, and we
in need
when we have the opportunity.
Yes.
And people within our congregation that have needs, we meet those needs. And so our church is a church that is made up primarily of working people.
All right.
And people who are concerned about souls and concerned about others.
All right.
And our intent is to preach the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ and win people to Christ and do a work for God.
All right. Are y'all pretty conservative or?
Yes, ma'am. We're a very traditional church.
Traditional church.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
there's a difference in a lot of the churches nowadays. And,
some are contemporary, and
yeah.
and
some are far out.
some a little far out. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
But ours is a very conservative church. We're very, very much traditional, and we still use a songbook, and we still sing out of the old hymnals, and we still sing the old songs.
I want you to look out into your camera. We have about a minute and a half left, and I want you to invite anyone to your church and tell them not only will they be impressed with the people and the services, but they'll be impressed with the way you handle things.
Well, we would truly enjoy you coming to visit with us.
Trinity Baptist, don't forget
Trinity Baptist, yes,
All
ma'am.
right.
We would enjoy you coming to Trinity Baptist Church and worshiping the Lord with us. We have a very unique church. We have a tremendous group of people who love the Lord, people who want to serve God, and I believe you would find a warm welcome, and we would enjoy you coming to worship the Lord with us.
All right. May I take the last minute then
Yes, ma'am.
of your interview and talk a little bit about Miss Margie?
All right. Yes,
Miss
ma'am.
Margie is the secretary to our fire chief here in Grand Prairie, Texas. She does lots and lots of good things as far as being a secretary to the chief, but she's also has been this past year the secretary to the safety and environmental committee that the mayor appoints, that several city council members sit on. I sit on this committee, and she is just wonderful. She is very efficient, and she's had a little bit of physical problems during the last 3 or 4 years, along with your speaker. We just admire her for continuing on in spite of the fact that she's had a recent reoccurrence of some of her illnesses, and that is the reason she isn't here today, to aid and abet her husband that she's been with these many years. And we're going to end the show with a picture that ran in the Arlington Morning News, and we infringed on their privacy. The Reverend Tom Heath did not bring a picture of Margie today, so we're wrapping it up with Miss Margie and a salute to her and to the Reverend Tom Heath. Thank you for this interview.
Thank you so much.
Is as we live and do. And thanks to Mr. Louis Tovar, we have this wonderful rendering of that photo.